আজি এটো 5:30 লৈকে চলিব লাগে ন এতিয়া লেকচাৰ এটা আছে আজি লেকচাৰ কি সফটওয়্যার ইউজ করি আছে এটা OBS हेलो सर हम लोग OBS स्टूडियो यूज कर रहे हैं अभी थोड़ा काम कर रहा है रुकिए मैं दूसरा लैपटॉप से एक बार ट्राई कर रहा हूँ हाँ आप अगर वाईफाई का कुछ इशू है तो आप वो देख लीजिए एक बार हाँ इंटरनेट में दिक्कत नहीं लेकिन यूट्यूब का वीडियो ही नहीं चल रहा है चलाना नहीं वीडियो वो चल रहा है मतलब बफरिंग हो रहा है सॉरी ये कैंपस कनेक्ट बड़ा लैपटॉप से बड़ा लेटर का ही दिखा रहा है छोटा लेटर का नहीं दिखा रहा है व्हाट्सएप पर मैसेज
व्हाट्सएप का मैसेज भी नहीं जा रहा नहीं मतलब वो सेंड नहीं हो रहा है व्हाट्सएप का मैसेज भी अपना हेवी अपना শান্তনু শৰ্মা ছাৰে এবাৰ কল কৰিব কৈছে কথা পাতিব বিচাৰিছিলে কিবা এটা পেন ড্ৰাইভটো কি হ'ল পেন ড্ৰাইভটো
মেমে দিম বুলি কৈ পেন ড্ৰাইভ নিদিলে ন দি আছো বুলি কৈ পেনে
অনন্যা পেন ড্ৰাইভটো দিলে নি মেমে
ল্যান্ড কোডৰ আনি আছে নি
এটা আনিবলৈ দিছে খালি এটো
এক্সট্ৰা পেন ড্ৰাইভ লাগে নে পেন
ড্ৰাইভ এক্সট্ৰা পেন ড্ৰাইভ লাগাছে
ৱাইফাইত কে এগুলা প্ৰগ্ৰামৰ ল্যানত মানে বেছি ভাল কিন্তু ইয়াৰ সাৰ্ভাৰটো আছে বেলেগত কোন সময়ত তাতে প্ৰবলেম হলে সবতে পাতে
মই আপোনাৰ কথাটো বুজিছো বাৰু
তাতে আছে
কাৰণ এতিয়া ৱাইফাইটো সাৰ্ভাৰৰ বাহিৰতে এইটো চলাও
কোনা ফোন কৰি দিছে ডাইৰেক্টৰ ছাৰ
নহয় আপোনাৰ লগত কথা পাতিম বুলি কৈছে এবাৰ
শান্তনু ছাৰ নম্বৰ নাই যে
নম্বৰ নাই নি
But they are engineers. They are engineers, but at the same time dancers. We have a dance club. Ah, yes. The drama club. Very nice, very nice. That's really good. For everyone, for all departments. Yes, all departments.
লাইন কেবুলৰ আছে খালি হেৰি নাই
ইগল লাগিলে মই দুজন দিম আছে
That's very nice. You have exams on dancing? Yeah, for entertainment. That's a very good point. My husband is saying that you should pursue So you like that means that that's the and then you will go and abroad and deliver lecture. It will be very nice. It's a long journey, but it is worth it.
Oh, Modi.
Later on, we have to feel a day and very exciting. My husband is a sugar. You have my email whenever you need something, so you can call Samsung and provide me. Yes, me too. I hope there will be a partnership with your university so that you can have like mobility exchange. It would be great. Perhaps in Egypt and Morocco, but especially
মেইন চাৰ্ভাৰটো আছে তো বাহিৰত আছে আমাৰ ইয়াত তাতে মানে প্ৰব্লেম হ'লে
তিনিটা লেপটপ আছে তাতো লাইনৰ পৰ্ট নাই আজিকালি নতুন লেপটপবিলাকত লাইনৰ পৰ্টটো উঠাই দিয়ে যে পাৰ্চনেল লেপটপ আছে মানুহৰ কিন্তু আৰু ইমান দিনৰ কাৰণে হেৰিবিলাকো আছে যে মানে এছাইনমেণ্টবিলাক আছে যে সেইটো কাৰণে দিবলৈও মানে অকণমান হেৰি হৈছে আৰু পাৰ্চনেল লেপটপবিলাক দি দিয়ে যে তাৰপিছত মই এটা কাম কৰিছোঁ মই নতুনকৈ এটা লিংক ক্ৰিয়েট কৰি আছোঁ মই এবাৰ মই ট্ৰাই এটা কৰিছোঁ মই এটা নতুনকৈ লিংক এটা ক্ৰিয়েট কৰিছোঁ আপুনি এবাৰ চেক কৰিব নি ইয়াত মানে একেবাৰে নেটৱৰ্ক চলা নাই মোৰ মোবাইল এটাও চলা নাই তো আপুনি কাইণ্ডলি এবাৰ চেক কৰিব নি বাৰু যে হেৰি সেই চেনেলটোত আৰু কিবা নতুন চলিছে নি বাৰু চলিছে ন
লেণ্ড পইণ্ট আছে লেপটপতেই লেণ্ড পইণ্ট নাই হেৰি নাই না পৰ্ট নাই না আছে কনভাৰ্টাৰ আছে না নাই কনভাৰ্টাৰ নাই কনভাৰ্টাৰ হা তুমি কৰাচোন কিবা এটা যদি
Is it possible to do it tomorrow? But there is no possibility to sort of
Wednesday.
কোন
Channel
ইয়াত কোনো নাই
কিবা
ষ্টুডেণ্টেহে
এতিয়া
চলাই
হেৰি
আছে প্ৰব্লেমটো ষ্টুডেণ্ট আছে
নতুন লিংক ক্ৰিয়েট কৰি আছোঁ
মই কেনেকৈ গম পাম মোক যে কৈ আছে মই কেনেকৈ গম পাম কেম্পাছখন কেম্পাছ কানেক্ট চলা নাই এতিয়া কেম্পাছ কানেক্টৰ চাই কেম্পাছ কানেক্টৰ চায়ো বেলেগ তাৰ কাৰণে কেম্পাছ কানেক্টৰ চোৱাৰ কাৰণে পাইছে মানুহ কোম্পানীৰ পৰা ৰাখিছে কোম্পানীয়ে বনাই আছে মই কেনেকৈ গম পাম কেম্পাছ কানেক্টৰ
কিবা এটাতো হৈ আছে দাদা
আৰু মোৰ মোবাইলতো কেম্পাছ কানেক্ট কৰি মই ইউটিউব চাব পৰা নাই কেম্পাছ কানেক্ট এইটো চাৰে ক'ব লাগিব না এতিয়া মই ক'লে ঘূৰি আহিব নেকি ইয়াত হৈছে নে ক'ত হৈছে কেনেকৈ গম পাম
Yes. 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 Thank you. Yes, okay, it's fine. Yeah, exactly. Um, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I am very glad to welcome you again to our series of lectures on human rights and media tracking. So today's lecture, or this afternoon's lecture, will be a little bit maybe like a summary of all the things that we have done, especially that we have covered so far, especially concerning the topic of non-government organizations. So today we are going to see the challenges and the opportunities that non-government organizations of course enjoy. So the bigger the challenge, the bigger the opportunity for growth. So this is one of the major principles of course that non-government organizations is using in order to work with, because sometimes anytime for example we work and we aspire to do something which is very noble and which is of course for the benefit of our communities, for the benefit of our society, but sometimes all the times we face some challenges, but we shouldn't stop here. We should of course challenge those challenges, and we should go beyond those challenges, and we should all seek solutions to those challenges, sometimes even as the Afro-American Paul Gilroy claims, and the sublime would be to sip from a poisoned chalice. So anything, for example, that we achieve in our life, not just talking about non-government organizations, but anything. So sometimes, of course, it is a long journey. Sometimes we suffer, and sometimes, of course, we do have pain. But what is good is how to challenge those sufferings and how to challenge all the problems that we face in our life. It's the same thing with non-government organizations. So today's lecture is entitled, as you see, Challenges and Opportunities of Non-Government Organizations. So we are going to see what are the challenges that non-government organizations, either at the national level or at the international level, so they face. At the same time, we are going to see what opportunities these organizations, for example, enjoy, and how can we manage, for example, like a balance between those challenges and those opportunities. So as I have said, this lecture will be like a summary of the previous lectures, since we talked before about non-government organizations and media interface. We talked also about non-government organizations, global, local, for example, their duties, okay, their objectives, at the same time their strategies, how they work, how they perform their job in their communities. At the same time, we had the chance, for example, to study many cases, to get introduced to many international conference, and at the same time we have studied also some local examples from our local countries. So today we are going to just maybe shed more light on the those challenges and opportunities. But you see, as I have begun the lecture, so sometimes those challenges make us think of new solutions, new resolutions, and new also opportunities, because sometimes we do learn from that challenge. That challenge is that the first step towards prosperity, towards opportunities, and towards of course something which is good. So So in the light of this theme, okay, or of this topic that we are going to delve this afternoon, we have set up these objectives. So the first one, we are going to identify some challenges faced by non-government organizations, and we are going to discuss them and see to what extent really those organizations, to what extent they bear that challenge, and at the same time they are very patient, of course, to deal with those challenges, and they of course look for solutions. At the same time, we are going to explore opportunities for growth and impact. So we are going to see what are the opportunities that those organizations, for example, can make use of in order to seek growth and in order to have a tremendous impact on their societies and on their communities. Then we are going to discuss strategies to overcome challenges and maximize opportunities. So as I have said, we are going to see how can we balance between challenges and opportunities. Of course, the thing that we can, for example, say in this context is that those challenges, so they pave the way, of course, for great opportunities. So these are the things that we are going to see, because sometimes when any time, for example, and this is maybe within the work of non-government organizations, this is something which we can call self-evaluation. So each time, therefore they write final reports at the end, for example, of each of their activities. So sometimes even at the end, so they can, for example, question and interrogate their performances, for example, their jobs, their activism, their strategies, their policies, and they can assess them and evaluate them. They can also, and this process of evaluation, this process of assessment, so this will of course lead to something very important, is how to seek opportunities, how to learn from the mistakes, for example, how to go beyond those challenges. So sometimes maybe all the non-government organizations, so they engage in such works in order to evaluate their work. So we are going to see some non-government, of course, challenges. So what are they? And here I'm going to introduce to you maybe global challenges that almost all non-government organizations, it means all over the world, they suffer from, and they face those challenges. But of course they don't stop here, so they continue working. Well, so the first maybe this is like a global title or a general title, non-government organizations challenges. So the first one, funding constraints. So this is something very important, because if you would like an organization to work well, so of course it should be financed, it should have like a source of funding. So these are, we are going to see some very particular, what do you mean by funding restrictions or constraints. So sometimes those organizations, they don't have like a very fixed, stable source of funding or any fixed financial source, and sometimes they rely heavily on donations, sometimes they rely on grants, sometimes public or private, for example, funding. So this, of course, it causes dependence. So they depend sometimes on the government, sometimes they depend on just maybe charity like groups, and it creates something which is very sad, and this is a challenge really. It's financial instability. So this is one of the challenges, of course, that non-government organizations, of course, face, because they don't have most of the time, they don't have a very stable, fixed, of course, financial source, and this, of course, makes their work fluctuates, of course, between continuity and discontinuity. So this affects, of course, their their work. At the same time, there is another challenge, which is competition, of course, for resources. So this is also another problem, because often non-government organizations, so they compete for limited funds. Sometimes it's like, for example, when like some European, for example, associations or American associations, sometimes they give donations, they give aid, for example, but those like local organizations, so they compete. Okay, so here again, so there is all the time this competition for aid. Okay, this competition to get financial, of course, resources. There is also the donor requirements. So sometimes they need donors. Sometimes they even use advertisement to just publish their demands, for example. But they face they face so many challenges. Why? Because those donors, they are not that fixed, they are not that stable. Okay, so sometimes they can have donations, sometimes no. So it depends also on the agenda of the donors. Lack of office spaces. So, and this is something that really many organizations they suffer from. They don't have an office, they don't have a space when they can, for example, handle meetings, when they can meet each other to negotiate. They don't have, and this is something really, it's a real challenge. It's very sad to hear that there are many non-government organizations, especially sometimes at the local level. Yes, they work hard, and they really they do a service, okay, to their communities, but they don't have that office spaces. Most of the time, what they do is that they rely on just media platforms, and they publish anything on media. Sometimes even they handle like online distance meetings, and we have seen to what extent media plays a very pivotal role in enhancing, of course, the work of non-government organizations. So this is what concerns funding constraints, is financial, of course, we can call it even financial challenge. There are many other challenges that those organizations, for example, face. So legal constraints also. So as you see, governmental regulations. Sometimes the non-government organizations, they face what we call like governments imposed. It imposes, or governments often impose some what we call bureaucratic barriers. Sometimes many administrative like procedures that they should, for example, undergo in order to achieve their goals, and this is, of course, it affects their work, and it limits their ability to operate freely and with freedom. This is something very, very important, but of course they must, of course, challenge this handicap or this stumbling block. Well, there is also suspicion and scrutiny. So sometimes even you find that the government or non-government organizations, they are viewed with suspicion, and sometimes they are even controlled by the governments. Their activities also are sometimes even controlled. So this is also a challenge that non-government organizations face. Legal compliance also. It means that sometimes they face like what we call legal requirements and international standards, and sometimes it's very, they should, of course, be adapted with international laws, with international standards. So this is something which is very, very required, especially if they are like small organizations without extensive legal expertise. So these are some very of course important challenges. There is also government interference. So as I have said, this is also a challenge that many non-government organizations all over the world face. Government interference means that sometimes the work of non-government organizations is of course is under control, sometimes is under pressure. Sometimes those organizations cannot perform their job as it should be because there is all the time this government interference. So sometimes they can even change schedules, they can change their planning, they can change their agenda. So it depends. So this is also, it has many relationship with the legal compliance. So they should be adapted to the international law. At the same time, they should be adapted to the national law. So this is also what we call the legal constraints. So they should face the bureaucracies either outside or inside their communities. It's the same time we talk about challenges. So this is another general challenge, operational and logistical challenges. So what do you mean by operational and logistical challenges? So this is it. Limited. So those organizations face limited resources and staff. So sometimes because of this lack of financial support, for example, so they need also human resources. So this is also a challenge which makes of course their work of course very complicated and sometimes not that feasible because they need staff, they need human resources of course, and sometimes even they need experts because this is the all non-government organizations. So they work with members and so on and so forth, that's fine, but sometimes in very specific issues like environmental issues, like human rights issues, for example, like legal issues, for example. So they need to of course they need specialist staff, they need specialist experts, but of course they face this challenge because it's very hard to find them. Sometimes even they don't. Again, we are going to repeat that very important of course challenge that they face is the financial source. Working in crisis zones, sometimes this is the work of non-government organizations. So sometimes they work in very dangerous places where you can find like disasters, sometimes even pandemics, sometimes political instability, sometimes even wars. So and this also poses significant risks to staff, again to human resources. So this is also a very important, of course, very sad challenge that those organizations suffer from. At the same time, we can talk about another challenge: transparency and accountability. Well, so this also it's very important because sometimes, as I have said, the work of non-government organizations is all the time under pressure, is all the time under government interference. So sometimes it's very hard to demonstrate transparency and accountability in their operations and in their work. So sometimes this of course requires robust monitoring or evaluation and reporting processes, but of course because of this pressure, because of this government interference sometimes, so they cannot of course attain or reach this goal, unfortunately speaking. Lack of strategic planning, this is also we can consider it also as a challenge that those organizations, for example, face. So strategic planning, this is something very, very important. Why? Because each, for example, non-governmental organization so should have like a long-term planning and a short-term planning. So it depends, for example, on what the community needs from this organization. Sometimes you find those organizations, they don't work within a very clear, very visible planning, very visible agenda. and this of course again handicaps their work and handicaps their operation within their communities. So they should of course go beyond this challenge by organizing of course a long-term planning, by studying all the surroundings, studying the conditions, because it's sometimes it's even very difficult to handle like a long-term strategic plan, because you should study the social, cultural, political, and sometimes even what future anticipation. So you should anticipate what will be in the future, and this is something which is exactly which is the core role of non-government organizations. So this is it's within of course their work, within their policies. So they should of course anticipate, they should have a long-term planning in order to handle and to find solutions to problems, or sometimes even before having those problems. So they should anticipate solutions. Let's continue with the challenges all the time. So you see that those non-government organizations, so they suffer a lot, and they have so many really they face so many challenges. So here, maintaining relevance and adaptability. So this is also very crucial, unfortunately speaking. So highlighting priorities or shifting priorities. So sometimes non-government organizations, so they find this challenge is that sometimes they should be adapted to some very important or changing contexts, like emerging challenges like climate change, for example, sometimes refugee crisis, sometimes pandemics, global pandemics. So they should highlight the priorities. So they should shift the priorities, like the pandemic, for example. So this is healthcare, so this is really a priority. So highlighting priorities sometimes become or it becomes really a very crucial issue, and a very it's a very serious challenge. Well, demonstrating also impact. So sometimes non-government organizations, so they are expected to show tangible impact in order to justify continued funding and support. So this is sometimes even it's a challenge. Why? Because any work, for example, that those non-government organizations, for example, do or perform, so they should have a trace, they should have like something tangible, like for example writing reports about their work. Why? In order to they should demonstrate what they have done, maybe a yearly report or a monthly report. So they should have reports. So I told you before that this is something that the media where the media can intervene, for example, because it can help, for example, it can help non-government organizations to publish reports, to write reports, for example, to demonstrate the impact. Because otherwise, if they don't demonstrate impact, so they cannot get funding, and they cannot get finance, they cannot get support. So they should demonstrate this impact, but sometimes it's really a challenge. Yes, so let's continue. Technology gap. Sometimes even these non-government organizations, as you see, we can relate all those handicaps, for example, or those stumbling blocks or challenges to something which is very important. It's funding constraints, financial support, financial resources. Because even the technology, for example, gap, what does it mean? It means lack of technological infrastructure. Sometimes, as I told you before, sometimes you find an organization without any office, without any, for example, like digital equipment, without any technological infrastructure. So how can this organization, for example, that faces this problem, how can it be able to mobilize resources online to compete for its visibility, for example, online? So this is really a very serious, again, challenge that many non-government organizations, of course, face. And and what I would like to emphasize here is that one organization cannot face all these challenges, but it depends. Some organizations, they face, for example, like this highlighting priorities. Others may face, for example, like funding constraints. So it depends on the situation. It depends on the context. It depends on the where the non-government organization is situated. It depends on the how it works. It depends on when it works also. So all these things, of course, they do matter in situating and posing challenges. Lack of effective networking is something that is very needed, very demanded, especially in this technological era, and non-government organization cannot mobilize people, cannot perform, of course, their job without this effective networking. What does it mean? It means it's not just networking among the members of the society, or among the members, for example, of the non-government organization itself. No, it's effective networking. It means the international effective networking at the international level. So this is also a very serious obstacle, because sometimes those organizations cannot have the opportunity to build connection with other non-government organizations, to build partnerships, for example, with other organizations, because sometimes even there is this lack of communication, this lack of networking. And this is also a challenge that is faced by not all organizations all over the world, but some organizations, of course, may face, for example, this problem. So unfortunately speaking, although those non-government organizations, although they really perform a very good job, and they of course benefit our societies, and they work with so many credible approaches, like the approach that we saw yesterday, the human rights based approach, and really the communities, the societies, and the world is in dire need of such non-government organizations, of course. But unfortunately speaking, so they face so many challenges. But what is very important here is that they don't stop here. They don't succumb, of course, to those challenges at all. They continue their working, and of course, instead of stopping, of succumbing to these, or submitting themselves to these challenges, no. So they learn from those challenges, and those challenges, maybe they enable them to spot maybe the mistakes, to spot what is good, what is bad, and how maybe those challenges will pave the way for them to just continue and pursue their noble mission. So therefore, those, of course, challenges help those organizations to seek and aspire to have opportunities. So sometimes a challenge is just the first step to have an opportunity. It's just, we sometimes, even if you make mistakes, so you learn from your mistakes. It's the same thing for non-government organizations. So they have challenges, yes, they have so many problems, so many obstacles, but they don't stop here, but they continue, they pursue their, of course, their job and their work. Well, so let's see what are the opportunities that non-government organizations, for example, enjoy. So here we are going to talk about enjoyment, not suffering, no pain. So increasing global awareness and connectivity. So this is also, it's an opportunity. We are going to see how. So we have talked, we talked this morning about the role of media in enhancing the work of those organizations. So this is an opportunity. So non-government organizations, of course, can enjoy the digital platforms, and they can also even publish and advertise their challenges via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, for example. So this is also something which is very important. It's the rise of social media, of course, helps a lot non-government organizations. So this is also an opportunity for them, so to just exploit, manipulate this digital, of course, or those digital platforms. There is also another opportunity. It's global solidarity movements. So this is also very important. It increases awareness of global issues. So, and sometimes like climate change, for example, environmental protection, gender equality, social justice, and this, of course, it increases more support for non-government organizations causes. So people around the world, when they see, for example, these issues, okay, published by or delivered by those non-government organizations, so of course this enhances around the globe more solidarity, and they enhances more connectivity around the whole world, and this also presents opportunities to non-government organizations for what? For collaboration and funding. So you see, all the time when we talk about like opportunities, especially this question of increasing global awareness and connectivity, so we can seek help from digital platforms or from the media in general. So this global solidarity movement, this is something very important, and this is really a very like golden opportunity to those organizations. Why? Because this solidarity will also help those organizations to go beyond the financial problem, to go beyond financial, for example, obstacle. Why? Because when you launch something, when you have connections with other organizations, so you can, of course, seek more, for example, funding and more financial support. Other, of course, opportunities, so partnerships and collaborations. So this is also an opportunity. So collaboration sometimes with like, you see, public-private partnerships. Sometimes this is an opportunity because non-government organizations so can collaborate with private sectors, even can collaborate with companies, with governments, with international organizations, of course, to pool resources, of course, to access expertise and to increase, of course, their influence. At the same time, they can engage in partnerships with even with the public spheres, with their governments, for example, in order to seek more funding. So this partnership is very important, either at the local level or at the global level. So they can even seek partnerships, for example, beyond their borders or beyond the borders of their communities. Well, so also, so there is this collaboration with other non-government organizations via coalitions, for example, and alliances. So for example, many organizations, so you find them in many places all over the world. So because of this coalition, sometimes you have like a central organization, but you find many other, for example, partners all over the world. And this is something, of course, that can be considered as a very crucial seminal opportunity for non-government organization, because it allows them to tackle complex interconnected issues more effectively. Yes. Well, so another, of course, opportunity, it's innovation and technology. So data and analytics. So this is also something which can be considered as an opportunity today, because non-government organizations, so sometimes they are increasing using data analysis, for example, to improve what? To improve decision making, okay, to monitor their impact sometimes, to tailor their interventions to specific needs. So this is also very important, and it is considered as an opportunity. There is also fundraising, okay, so this is also something very important. There is also emerging technologies, as I have said, so this is also an opportunity. So the non-government organizations could seek or could perform their initiatives, for example, and render them into practice by using the emerging technologies to, of course, access to services in remote, for example, areas. Digital fundraising, this is something also very important. It means like it include like online fundraising. So nowadays it's very easy for the government, for example, to get involved in subscription models, okay, via the internet, to seek, for example, or generate financial support. So it can, for example, like this is also an opportunity for those organizations, because they can have like a platform where an online, for example, a platform or an online fundraising method, so that they can get the financial support easily just via the internet. That's online funding. So this is it, like how we pay, for example, so many things via internet. So even concerning this issue of funding, so they can get this funding just via like charities, for example, donations. So they can get them via those fundraising, for example, platforms. All the time opportunities, so advocacy and policy influence. So of course today, so there is this growing influence on policy. So this is an opportunity, of course. Why? Because we've talked about partnerships. So non-government organizations can be partners to governments, so they can, of course, they can, through their stakeholders, they can affect policies. They can even generate maybe some social, cultural, for example, strategies. So they have this opportunity really to participate, to influence decision making at local and at global level. There is also engaging younger generations. So this is also an opportunity for non-government organizations, sometimes even especially the non-government organizations that are very specialized, like in education, for example, in mobilizing youth to protect the environment, or in investing in youth. So this is something very important. So they can engage younger generation, they can raise the younger generation's awareness about their environment, for example. They can mobilize them to engage into volunteer programs. They can also engage younger generation to take awareness initiatives, for example. They can engage them in building their small communities, small villages. So this is also an opportunity for non-government organizations that they can make use of. Why? Because they, as I have said before, those organizations, they know, they have this insight, because they know what's going on in the communities. They study the community. They can detect what the community needs, and what is the weakest point in the community, what is the strongest point. So they can detect problems so easily. They can know even the population well. They can know the cultural diversity in the population, and this is something which is very important. And and of course it presents really very important opportunities that those organizations can use in order to enhance and perform their work. All the time talking about non-government organizations opportunities evolving, refining, okay, donor landscape. How? Local resource mobilization. So they have this opportunity to just invest in local resources, okay, to receive corporate funding, for example, either from partnerships for mutual benefits, for example. So they can build like a partnership with any other organization at a local level, and they can have like mutual benefits, so that they can so this is also an opportunity, so that they can mobilize local sources to get more funding. Why not? Corporate social responsibility. So this is also an opportunity, because this is maybe one of the rules of non-government organizations, is to mobilize, of course, social responsibility, to build collaborations and cooperation with their societies, with the responsible people in society, in order to fulfill social responsibility goals. Okay, now after dealing with challenges, and after tackling non-government organizations opportunities, so which is when we talk about opportunities, so this is something very optimistic, very hopeful. So and I have begun with challenges, because I don't want to end with the challenges. So challenges the first step, but the second step is the opportunities. So let's not be so pessimistic, because we can deduce and we can decipher many times the hard work that is performed by non-government organizations all over the world. Now let's see how those opportunities and challenges, how can they build like a balance, how can they build like an equilibrium. So let's discuss both balancing challenges and opportunities. As I have said in the very beginning, the bigger the challenge, the greater the opportunity. So this is the same thing. So sometimes even we learn from those challenges to spot the mistakes, to spot, for example, the weakest points, and to enables us, of course, to focus on sustainable solutions. This is also one of the major things that we can talk about. Building strong relationships. This is also this is how we can balance challenges and opportunities. Those relationships should be built, of course, or should establish trust and strong, of course, tie. The tie should be based on credibility and on trust. And this is something also very important. Also, we should base our relationships on transparency and on accountability. Investing capacity building, so it means strengthening organizational capacity through training, sometimes even training the youth through, for example, managing resources. So this is also, it helps non-government organization better handle those challenges and remain very, very competitive. So this is investing capacity building. There is also here investing in the younger generation, in order what, of course, in order to balance the challenge with the opportunity, focusing on sustainable, of course, solutions. So I have already talked about it, but anyway, so it means that we should prioritize, of course, sustainable solutions in order to solve the problems of our communities, and in order to empower, of course, local populations, and especially the underrepresented, of course, people. Adapting to technology technological advances. This is something very important, and we have seen the challenge. Sometimes non-government organizations, of course, they face like technological lack of infrastructure, lack of digital equipment, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they can use the media, they can use technology to render, of course, their mission very accessible. And at the same time, this can to just go beyond that challenge. So we can, for example, balance it. It means we can embrace like digital tools for outreach. For example, we can adapt, or those governments, for example, those non-government organizations, so they can adapt their work with this technological advancement and this technological progress, because this is something which is very important in order to create that balance between challenges and opportunities. Well, so I think that grosso modo, so we have tackled so far so many issues that are very relevant to non-government organizations. We have talked about the challenges they face. We have talked about the opportunities they enjoy, and also we talked about how they can balance challenges and opportunities. But at the same time, what we can emphasize in this context is that those non-government organizations really, they perform a very noble mission, and they help communities, of course, to get empowered to enjoy sustainable development at all levels, either at the social, cultural, or political level. And this is how we can end our lecture, and how we can, for example, end also our lectures on non-government organizations, because really they are very necessary in our society, and our society is in dire need of such non-government organizations, because we need, as we talked before, we need organizations to defend human rights, to present underrepresented people, to defend to also defend children's rights, marginal, vulnerable people's rights, peoples with disabilities, and at the same time to empower local populations, local communities. So therefore I opt for this quotation to end our lecture today by Mahatma Gandhi. So he claims that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And I think this quotation summarizes the core work of non-government organizations. So this is something very noble, and what they do is really very noble. And though they face many challenges, many problems, many stumbling blocks, but still they aspire to make our world a better place where everyone can enjoy his or her full human rights. So this is something that we can, for example, deduce from this very significant, very symbolic quotation. This is also a message to everyone in our society, not just non-government organizations, but each individual in our communities, in our society, should bear this burden and should assume this responsibility to, of course, be in the service of other people, to help his or her family, to help his or her community, his or her society. So each individual should assume that responsibility if we would like, we all people, so we aspire to enjoy, of course, sustainability, and to enjoy peace, healthcare, welfare, and well-being in our societies. Another thing, of course, that we can also, from which we can get inspired. This is another saying by Mother Teresa. So, and this an addition to the work of non-government organizations or any individual work also. not just collective work. So according to her, it's not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving. This is also something very important that summarizes, of course, the noble mission of non-government organizations, and of course anyone, because those organizations really, as I have emphasized so many times, they perform and they have very noble objectives, and they take care of our societies, of our communities. They work hard. They face many challenges, but they go beyond. They don't stop there. And even the work that they do sometimes is full of love, full of peace, full of aspiration, full of determination, full of perseverance. So this is how of course we can describe them. And this is a message to everyone in our, for example, communities, to all individuals in our communities. So they should of course stem from those noble principles in order to defend, and at the same time in order to reach the essence of humanity. So these are the references, if you can consult them at the end. Thank you very much.